Good morning, ladies. I am coming to you Tuesday morning for our lecture this morning. I logged into BlueJeans and didn't see anybody log in this morning, which is completely fine. If this needs to be our new way of communication, I am totally fine with that. If the 8:10 is not working on Tuesday morning, I do not mind uploading this YouTube video to our lecture in Google Classroom. So if this is the way that we need to communicate from here on, completely fine with that. It does not bother me at all, as long as you guys are getting what you need from me in the lecture portion of this class. So with that being said, we are in chapter 12. There are 15 chapters total. So we are moving right along. We are right on track with, actually we're on track with DC3's calendar. So I might need to look to see, that might put us ahead a week, so you may have that last week off. I'm not quite sure when Meade and Kiowa County get out of school, but I'm pretty sure DC3 gets out before the week before. So we may need to look into that. That might just be, I won't add any content, but that might just be an extra week that you have to get assignments in, fill any loose holes, and then for your philosophy of education final. So I'll get that posted, but we are on track. And chapter 12, we're moving right along. Chapter 12 is how should schools be reformed? And when you think of reform, you think of the word change. So as a 17, 18-year-old, you have probably experienced two reforms in your education career. You may not have known that you were in the middle of a reform, but indeed, reforms have happened probably twice since you've been in school. There's two YouTube videos, I believe, that we're going to go through today. Yep, there's reform movements, and this is a 7-minute video. This is kind of a review of what we have learned in the past about the 19th century reforms of education. It kind of talks about, it goes through the Romanticism that we've already talked about, and it just kind of gives you a little bit more of a visual, if you will. And then this video is also a 7-minute video. This is more recent, and this is a documentary from PBS, and it talks about how schools in America may be addicted to reform. So what does that mean, and how does that affect you as a student, and how does that affect you as a teacher? I really, really liked this YouTube or this PBS documentary. I hope you enjoy it. It does go a little bit deeper in what reforms we are currently in and what reforms we're just coming off of. So with that being said, the chapter starts out with No Child Left Behind. This book was published it is older than what I would have liked. Originally in 2010 and then updated in 2016. So 2010, we're talking about No Child Left Behind. Let me move there we go. So this article talks about No Child Left Behind. This was in the George W. Bush era, and it was the biggest reform that I have been through as an educator. So it had a lot to do with standardized testing, which is your formal testing, your state assessments, your ACT, and there were policies and procedures that were put in place at school districts at the government level to show improvement. Okay, so I was a brand new teacher. I really had no idea how scary this was, but looking back, I remember my colleagues, my other teachers across the hall, how scared they were because of this act that was put in, No Child Left Behind. NCLB is the acronym, so if you ever come across NCLB, yeah, like right here, NCLB, that means No Child Left Behind. So what this basically means is I can't remember the year, 2010, I think it was before, maybe, let's say 2010, whatever the year was, I'll look that up, but it was saying that 30% of your students will be proficient in 2010 by the end of the year. Okay, so that seems like pretty attainable goal. Out of your class, 30% can be at grade level or above grade level. Okay, the problem lies with the next year in 2011, 35% of your students. And then in 2012, 40% of your students. And the bar, don't quote me on the actual percentages, but the bar just kept raising to where the end goal was 100% of your students will be proficient. So I want you to think about that. 100% of the students in your classroom by a certain date will be 100% efficient. So they will be at grade level or above. So I want you to think about a classroom that maybe your own class, maybe a classroom that you are observing in or TAing in. How is it possible that the government will tell you that every student will be successful and not successful, but every student will be at or above grade level on a state assessment by the end of the year? Okay, so that doesn't account for your special needs student. That doesn't account for your student who has test anxiety. That doesn't account for your student who just came from Mexico and doesn't know any Spanish or doesn't know any English. That doesn't account for your dyslexic student who is very intelligent but needs the test read to them but can't have that accommodation. Okay, so there's a lot of stressors. There's a lot of outlying layers that the government basically just said, I don't care. You do what you're going to need to do to get 100% of your students efficient. So it started out as not really a stressful reform, but by the end, it had teachers leaving the profession. It had teachers stressed out. It had administrators firing teachers because they had to be held accountable. Because there's just no way, let's face it, there is no way that 100% of students in your classroom will be at or above grade level. And if they are, miraculously for that year, the next year, what are the odds of 100% of them? Without actually cheating on the state assessment and taking that state assessment with fidelity. So there was a lot of stress that came with No Child Left Behind. This is an article, and I want you to read this. I don't know how far it goes down there. And then there's the second reform, which is the Common Core state standards. Okay, so No Child Left Behind is no longer a thing. It turned into the ESEA, Every Student Succeeds. No, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, and that you'll read a little bit about that also. But there's no longer the percentages that teachers have to meet. Okay, so or else they'll be held accountable. The Common Core state standards, you've all gone through this reform. I'm sure you remember. I don't know that you actually remember math or ELA before Common Core. I would be interested to hear what you guys remember before Common Core. But we all know that Common Core is a set of standards that was adopted nationwide. Okay, so the overall view or goal of Common Core was that if a student in third grade, second semester from Texas transferred to Kansas, it would just be very fluid. The standards, the curriculum would all just be, they would just pick up where they left off essentially, because everyone is learning the same curriculum. They're following the same standards. Everybody has the same set of standards, and we're all, paced kind of in the same area. Schools may start 2 weeks later or 2 weeks earlier, or have Veterans Day off, or, have a longer Christmas break. But for the main purpose of this, schools across our nation would be at the same point in the exact same time. So there was a little bit of controversy. Well, there's a lot of controversial over the Common Core state standards. I'm going to let you guys create your own opinion. I can think of about 10 great things about Common Core, but I could also think of about 10 things that make me crazy about Common Core. So I really don't have an opinion, but I don't want to force any opinion on you guys. I want you to read this and form your own opinion, basically. Math. When I taught first grade math before Common Core, and I taught first grade math after Common Core. I will say that math is definitely, what you hear all the buzz about, your parents saying, that's not how I learned it. Why can't they just teach it the old way? And my response to that is, when I was in first grade teaching math, I would teach my students Let me use a visual here. I would teach my students double digit addition. You know, we might add 25 plus 15, and this would be a pretty on grade level addition problem. So when we were taught that you add the numbers in the ones place first. 5 plus 5 is 10. You put the 1 and you put the 0 in the ones place, and then you add 1 plus 2 plus 5. Same concept in Common Core, except you teach students that you don't just put the 1 in the tens place. It's actually a 10. It's a bundle of 10. And it takes place value a lot deeper than I ever learned as a student. So that's one of the things that I didn't mind, because at the lower level, it really, really set that base up for number sense and place value stronger than I had ever seen it taught before. So like I said, there's great things. There's also stressful things about Common Core. But that's your second article that I would like for you to read. The third thing, it doesn't look like it's going to let you open it. Oh, yeah. Okay. So Kansas State, the KSDE, the Kansas State Department of Education, has strong feelings about reform and education, and we want to be the leaders of success. So Kansas leads the world in the success of each student. So that's Randy Watson, our Commissioner of Education. That's his goal for Kansans. He set out to have redesigned schools, and redesigned schools are what this article is about. Kansas districts are invited to apply each year to become a part of the redesign project. To be considered for this project, there's some elements that have to be identified. And here is a list of the students or the districts who are a part of the reform. So we have Mercury, which is first, Gemini, Gemini 2, Apollo, Apollo 2, and Apollo 3. I would like for you to read through some of these facts. And it's actually a great concept to be a reformed, a redesigned school. I have visited Ingalls is a redesigned school, and they are doing some wonderful things. They're also doing some things that, you know, teachers and parents aren't liking. But that's education. I have visited Skyline. Skyline is a redesigned school. Skyline has soft starts. Skyline has a flexible schedule. It's called FlexMod. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of FlexMod, or if you have a FlexMod in your schools. I don't think Iowa County does. I'm not sure about Meade. FlexMod could be something like, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have class as normal. On Tuesday, Thursday, you have class in block periods. So you have 4 blocks, and they're all 90 minutes long or 95 minutes long. FlexMod could mean you have, I think Skyline has a block in the morning and then hours in the afternoon. So within that 90 minutes, it could also be flexed. You could be in ELA for 90 minutes and then tell your ELA teacher, I don't need 90 minutes in here. I have a Christmas concert coming up and I need to go practice my saxophone. So they sign off and you go to the music department and you practice your saxophone, or, you know, it's just a very flexed schedule. There's great things. Teachers love redesign. Some teachers do not like redesign because they're strict on that bell schedule and they want 55 minutes with their students, and then they want their students to leave and a new set of students to come. So there are benefits of a FlexMod schedule because you could essentially have your kids for twice as long. You may need them on Monday for a whole 95 minutes, and then Tuesday really not need to see them at all. So then they were kind of able to choose where they're going. So I want you to kind of work through this redesign. Your assignment today is to interview your principal or someone in administration. This could be your principal, your superintendent, your assistant principal. It could even be your counselor. Maybe a secretary, they might know, but I would stick with some administration. So I want you to ask your administration, first of all, tell them that you're studying school reform, and that you know that reform means change, and you just have some questions to ask them about how education has changed and how it's currently changing right now. Ask your administrator if you are a KSDE redesigned school. if you are, ask them details about that. So ask them when you became a redesign school, what you changed, maybe it affected your schedule, maybe it affected the classes that you offer, maybe it affected how you have class. I know Ingalls does a lot of online learning. If you're not a redesign school, ask them why they decided not to be a redesign school, because that's being a redesign school is essentially up to the district. So the superintendent, the administrators, the school board, they got to decide whether they wanted to be a redesign school in the state of Kansas or not. So if you are not, ask them why they didn't want to be a redesign school. And if they're not, which we are not in Buckland, we are not a redesign school, but we've made efforts to kind of intermingle some redesign efforts, but not really be identified as a redesign school. And then write a paragraph about your findings. So one answer or the other is not wrong. So if you are or if you aren't, neither answer is wrong. I just want you to kind of get some information about that decision that was made, whether they were going to be a redesign school or not. And then the last thing that I want you to do is ask your administrator about KESA and list your school's 5 goals. So within our redesign now is the KESA process. So KESA stands for Kansas Education Systems Accreditation Guidance. So another acronym for you in education. It's full of acronyms. This is our school's new way of accreditation. So instead of test scores, state assessments, test scores, the state of Kansas is determining whether students or whether schools get accredited or not, which means if they get fully funded or not, through this KESA process. So there's 5 pillars, and the 5 pillars are social emotional factors. You have a social emotional goal, and you as a student may have seen something that is new within the last 5 years for social emotional. So when you were in junior high, you might not have had to check in every day on your Chromebook and open up your Chromebook and log into your Google Classroom and have a check-in, like a social emotional check-in. How do you feel? Is anything bothering you? Anything social emotional. You may not remember that in junior high, but that might have been something that's been put in place after for KESA. There's also a kindergarten readiness goal. It's the state wants each student to enter kindergarten socially, emotionally, and academically prepared. So your school has a kindergarten readiness goal. You probably don't know that and don't remember any of that, but you'll have to ask them. Individual plan of study, or IPS. So as a high school student, I guaranteed you have heard of IPS. You're probably thinking, my school is so dumb. Why do I have to do this? They're implementing this IPS. It's just one more thing that we have to do. Well, guess what? It didn't come from them. It was not your principal or your superintendent's idea. It came from KSE. Whether or not you are doing this depends on if your school gets accredited or not. So if you want your school to stay open and receive money so you guys can have nice things, just do your IPS with Fidelity. Each student has an individual plan of study that identifies talents, passions, and interests that will be used when selecting high school courses in career exploration. So this should be easy for you. Just ask your administrator what their plan is for IPS. And then high school graduation. Each student graduates from high school with academic and cognitive preparation, as well as technical, employability, and civic engagement skills. And the last one is post-secondary success. So you may not know this, but as administrators, they have to fill in a piece of data that shows the post-secondary success. So the students who graduated 2 years from now, or 4 years ago, they're tracking them, emailing them, Facebook messaging, calling them and saying, hey, what are you doing now? Do you have a job? Are you still in school? And they are ticking that on the data spreadsheet and turning that into the state. So no pressure, but if you go to college, stay in college, get your degree, and it'll count against your post-secondary success for your school. If you go and get a job and you're employed, you're a successful member of society, paying taxes, that kind of thing, also counts. Just don't drop out of school and just live on the streets, basically. So post-secondary success is something that is being measured by the state and has a 2-year, a 4-year program study, tech certificate, or military service are all the end goal with that. So With that being said, you do not have to read this whole document. It's like 70 some pages, 80 pages. I just kind of wanted you to see these goals here on page 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so that is your lab. That is your assignment this week. So you're just going to write a paragraph and then list your 5 goals. So you don't need to write anything about the 5 goals, just any details about the 5 goals. Just list your 5 goals and then write a paragraph about redesign. So you will need to start planning now, getting with your superintendent, your principal. I suggest you just emailing them, sending them a formal email. Dear Mr. Jones, I am studying school reform in my Intro to Ed class, and I am needing to get with you to ask you a few short questions. Is there any time this week that you would be available to talk to me? And then sign your name. So make that kind of formal, like you are a teacher needing something. Teachers don't just say, hey, I need to talk to you, you know, kind of be respectful about your email. Okay, so back to chapter 12. I think, the last thing we need to talk about are what are some types of assessment. Within this chapter, I wanted to read to you. I wanted to read something else to you, but I'm kind of running long here. There's different types of assessment. So there's formal assessment and then there's informal assessment. Standardized tests, your state assessments, your ACT, those are all formalized tests. And then there's alternative assessment, informal, where your teacher may just observe you and give you a grade. You may have an interview. You may have a journal entry. You may make a PowerPoint with a rubric. Those are all informal means of assessment. And I just kind of want you to know the in-between about those. Okay, so real quick, I want to read you an excerpt from the textbook Steve Jobs on Education Reform. So as you know, Steve Jobs was the creator of Apple, and he went to Obama and said, hey, how schools are working right now is not really the way of the future. Schools need to be reformed. So here is that. Not long before he died in 2011, Steve Jobs, the legendary co-founder of Apple and the creator of the Mac, the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod, and many more electronic devices, spoke to President Barack Obama about the need to reform our schools. In a one-to-one meeting, he spoke passionately about the need for teachers to be treated as professionals and not as industrial assembly-like workers. Further, school principals should be empowered to control the hiring and firing process to ensure the quality of teaching and learning in their schools. Steve Jobs also urged that the president campaign should have an effort to extend the school day until 6 p.m. and the school year to at least full 11 months. He ridiculed the current system where teachers stand at blackboards and students rely on textbooks is not working. He pressed for the whole process, textbooks, materials, and assessments to be digital and interactive in a system tailored to individual students. So I could see since 2011, some of that is happening. Obviously, we don't go to school till 6 p.m. and aren't in school for 11 months, but a lot of our textbooks and material and obviously classes have gone digital. The president was open to Steve Jobs' idea and suggested that Jobs pull together a dinner meeting between the president and a half dozen of Silicon Valley's businessmen. The evening had no shortage of suggestions, particularly those centering on reviving American industry and making it more competitive. When it was Jobs' turn, he spoke about America's failure to educate and produce the engineers that were crucial to our economic viability. At one time, Apple had several factories in China, employing 700,000 workers. He explained that the reason these factories were in China and not in the United States was due to the fact that these workers had to be supported by 30,000 engineers, and he simply could not find 30,000 engineers in the United States. Jobs' answer was for the nation to mount a major effort to train American students to basic engineering skills in manufacturing. That meant more tech schools, community colleges, and trade schools. He ended by telling the president, if you could educate these engineers, we could move more manufacturing plants to the United States. So I think some of that has happened. We in Buckland are really valuing the students and the cooperation that we have with Dodge City Community College. So we have students every year that are graduating high school with tech degrees or with 2-year degrees, a welding certificate, a cosmetology degree. So I think we've moved a long way since 2011. That's just an example of school reform. So with that being said, I know that was a lot today, and there's still more that I could have said, but we'll save that for later. This is more of an exciting chapter. It's meaningful, more relevant to you than like the history of education, and I totally get that. So I hope you enjoy this material. As a student, like I said, you have experienced some of this reform, but as a teacher, I can guarantee you when you go into the teaching profession, which I really hope you do, you will be a part of 1, 2, if not 3 major school reform programs, whether it comes from KSCE if you stay in Kansas, or if it comes nationally from the government. School reform is something it's a guarantee. We're always trying to change and make it better. Some reforms don't make it better. Some reforms just bring a lot of stress, but you will, as a teacher, experience school reform. So just to have a little background knowledge about it, that's what Chapter 12 is. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Just as always, text me, email me, call me if you have any problems, and I hope you have a wonderful week.